The moment I saw my son slump in the courtroom chair, shoulders heavy, eyes darting nervously at the gallery, my chest tightened. Michael had always been proud and confident, the kind of man who faced the world with a smile, but lately his own home had become a battlefield he could never win. And today it had followed him here into the courtroom, under the harsh gaze of strangers and the pointed whispers of the people who claimed to love him. It had all started months ago, when Sarah, my daughter-in-law, began showing her true colors. At first I dismissed it as the brashness of youth, a sharp tongue, a quick temper, but soon her arrogance revealed itself in full. She didn't just speak over Michael at home. She laughed at his ideas, dismissed his advice, and made a public display of superiority in front of friends and family alike. She seemed to take pride in undermining him, relishing the way he shrank beneath her words. I had watched quietly, choosing my moments carefully. Many mothers might have exploded at the sight of their son being mocked, but I knew that sometimes the most powerful revenge came from patience. There was a storm brewing in me, one that would be unleashed at the perfect moment. And today, in the sterile courtroom, that moment had arrived. Subscribe to our channel, Retaliation, for more true, gripping stories of justice and revenge. The case was minor in the grand scheme, a property dispute that Sarah had dragged Michael into for reasons only she could justify. But the courtroom was her stage, and she was determined to dominate it. She stood tall, her sharp heels clicking on the marble floor, her suit impeccable, her expression one of smug confidence. Every word she uttered carried a subtle venom directed squarely at Michael. She mocked him openly, smirking as if the judge and everyone in the room would naturally side with her. And for a moment, it seemed like they did. The judge, a young man with barely a decade on the bench, listened patiently, but occasionally nodded at her arguments with interest. Michael's face grew red, not just from frustration, but from humiliation. He opened his mouth to respond, to correct her, but she cut him off every time, her voice rising just enough to make his own arguments seem insignificant. I had known Sarah was cunning, but seeing her like this, dominating the room with nothing but her arrogance and her self-assured sneer, was almost painful. Michael had never been weak. He had a backbone forged through years of hard work and perseverance. But here he looked like a child caught in the crossfire of her cruelty. As I approached the courtroom door, I slowed my pace. My presence here wasn't meant to be dramatic, it was meant to be precise, calculated, a silent statement of authority. I stepped through the doorway, my heels making barely a sound against the polished floor, my posture tall, my eyes steady. The moment I appeared, the atmosphere shifted. People glanced up, some surprised, others uneasy. The judge himself paused mid-sentence, his pen hovering over the papers before him. "Why are you here?" he whispered, a mix of confusion and recognition in his voice. The room went silent. Sarah froze, her smirk faltering. She turned toward me, expecting perhaps a timid apology or a soft greeting, but what she saw was nothing she could anticipate. I was calm, collected, and unwavering, a storm in human form, quiet but undeniable. Michael's eyes widened slightly, relief mixing with embarrassment. He had never expected me to intervene, but the weight of my presence alone shifted the energy in the room. Sarah's family, who had accompanied her, her brother, her mother, even a few distant relatives who clearly took pleasure in Michael's discomfort, looked at each other in panic. They hadn't planned for this. No one had. I walked slowly to the front, each step deliberate. The judge straightened in his chair, unsure, whispering again under his breath, "I wasn't expecting this." I simply nodded at him, a faint smile on my lips, and turned to face Sarah. Her expression had hardened again, but there was a crack now, a hint of doubt in her otherwise perfect mask. "You may continue," I said softly, my voice carrying through the room in a way that made even the gallery lean in. "But remember, truth cannot be hidden behind arrogance for long." She blinked, her composure momentarily shaken. Her arguments, once sharp and dominant, now felt exposed under my gaze. Every sentence she tried to deliver sounded smaller, weaker, as if my calm authority drained her confidence. I watched my son take a deep breath, shoulders straightening. He spoke, his voice stronger now, words measured but firm. He wasn't just defending his position in the property dispute. He was reclaiming his dignity, drawing strength from the presence of someone who had always been his unwavering support. The rest of the proceedings became almost secondary. Sarah continued, but the fire in her words had diminished. She was still clever, still articulate, but the edge had dulled. Michael answered more confidently, the truth of his position now shining brightly. And I stood behind him, silent but potent, the embodiment of a mother's love and the quiet power of someone who had watched injustice too long. After the session ended, Michael approached me in the hallway. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were filled with gratitude. "Mom, I don't even know what to say," he stammered. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "You just have to remember that strength is often quiet, and it is patience that turns the tables." Later, when Sarah tried to confront me in private, her usual arrogance cracked further. "Olivia, you can't just," she began, but I stopped her with a raised hand. "I can. I said simply, and I will if necessary, but I hope it doesn't come to that. Consider this a lesson, not a threat." Her glare could not hide the realization forming in her mind. For the first time, she saw that there were consequences for her actions that were bigger than herself. She had underestimated me as she had underestimated Michael, and the error was beginning to dawn on her. The next days were quiet but tense. Sarah's family began to retreat, unsure of how to act now that the dynamic had shifted. Michael, though exhausted from the emotional strain, regained some of the confidence that had been eroded. And I, Olivia, began the process of ensuring that this lesson extended beyond a single courtroom. I contacted a few attorneys I trusted, quietly reviewing past transactions, agreements, and legal documents that could protect my son from further exploitation. I wasn't seeking revenge in the conventional sense, no public spectacle, no rash confrontations. This was about justice, and more importantly, teaching a lesson that would linger in the minds of those who had believed themselves untouchable. At home, I spoke to Michael in a low, steady voice. "You must not let anger guide you," I said. "The world will test you in many ways, but patience and intelligence are far stronger than rage." He nodded, the tension in his frame easing slightly. "I've always known you were strong, Mom, but I never realized just how much. I am strong," I admitted, "but strength without control is worthless. Watch, observe, and act with precision. That is how we regain what was lost without stooping to their level." Sarah, oblivious to the strategic calm unfolding, continued her antics at home, attempting subtle manipulations and provocations. She underestimated the resolve I had cultivated over a lifetime of watching injustice and navigating complex family dynamics. Every smirk, every sly remark, every attempt to intimidate only confirmed that the timing for the real lesson was approaching. And I waited, calmly watching, allowing the arrogance of her and her family to grow just enough to make the eventual reckoning both surprising and complete. In the following weeks, small cracks began to appear. Sarah's plans faltered in subtle ways amidst appointment. An oversight in the documentation she had so proudly prepared, whispers of dissatisfaction from her own family members who sensed her arrogance, was now met with quiet authority they hadn't expected. Michael, once passive, grew more assertive, but under my guidance rather than out of defiance. Then came the day when the first real shock occurred. A letter arrived at the home carefully drafted and delivered, notifying Sarah and her family of certain legal and financial clarifications that had gone unnoticed until now. The envelope, stamped with my attorney's seal, carried the weight of undeniable authority. It was a subtle but unmistakable sign that the tables were beginning to turn. When Sarah opened it, her eyes widened in disbelief. She read the carefully worded clauses that highlighted her overreach and exposed the vulnerabilities in her attempts to control my son's life. Her once confident demeanor faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. Michael, standing beside her, looked to me with a mix of awe and relief. "Mom, you did all this," he whispered. I smiled gently. "I only did what needed to be done. Justice does not require theatrics. It requires patience, precision, and the courage to stand when others falter." The courtroom confrontation had been merely the beginning. What followed would teach a deeper lesson, one that would reach into every corner of their lives, ensuring that arrogance and disrespect could never again dominate those who were patient, wise, and strong. And as I watched my son regain his dignity and confidence, I felt a quiet satisfaction that was deeper than any vengeance. This was a victory not just for him, but for the truth, for fairness, and for the lesson that arrogance can never withstand the steady presence of those who know their worth. The moment had come to plan the next steps, subtle, firm, and irreversible. Olivia, as always, would not act rashly. She would act wisely, ensuring that when the final lesson landed, it would be felt, remembered, and respected. And somewhere in the distance, Sarah's smirk began to fade, replaced by the dawning realization that she had miscalculated the one person she should have never underestimated. The story was just beginning. After the courtroom incident, the atmosphere at home shifted subtly, though no one but Olivia truly noticed it at first. Sarah continued her attempts to dominate, but the confidence she had wielded so carelessly now faltered under a quiet pressure she couldn't quite identify. Every glance Olivia gave her, calm and unwavering, carried the weight of someone who had already won the battle in patience and preparation. Olivia spent the next few days meticulously reviewing every detail of Michael's business dealings, legal documents, and household finances. While Sarah was busy plotting little annoyances and asserting control, she remained oblivious to the larger forces quietly aligning against her. Olivia's eyes scanned contracts, receipts, and agreements, identifying every loophole, every clause, every potential advantage. She wasn't seeking revenge for the sake of anger. She was preparing justice, precise and unstoppable. Meanwhile, Sarah tried to continue her reign of superiority. She rearranged the furniture in Michael's office, placed her notes in his files, and made offhand comments about how she was running things better than he ever could. But each attempt was met with Olivia's quiet observation. Olivia never interfered openly. She simply recorded, remembered, and planned. Her calm presence reminded Michael of his own dignity, slowly strengthening his confidence with every silent gesture. Michael began to notice the subtle changes. Where he had once hesitated to stand up to his wife and her family, he now paused before agreeing to their every suggestion. He started to ask questions about decisions, checked his own documents, and occasionally gave Sarah a look that made her pause mid-sentence. Olivia had taught him through example. Confidence does not shout, it radiates. One evening, Olivia invited Michael to sit with her in the living room. The soft glow of the lamps reflected off the polished floors, and the house once dominated by Sarah's arrogance felt calm, ordered, and serene. "Michael," Olivia said quietly, "it's time we ensure that your life and your dignity are restored." He looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and awe in his eyes. "Mom, I don't even know where to start. She's relentless." Olivia smiled gently. "You start with patience, watch, observe, and let the arrogance reveal itself. Sarah's actions are predictable. Her need for control will be her undoing if we act wisely." Michael nodded, finally beginning to understand the depth of his mother's quiet power. The next morning, Sarah strutted into the kitchen, expecting Michael to grovel over her latest suggestions. Instead, she was met with a calm resolve. Michael listened to her ideas politely, asked questions that subtly highlighted flaws, and refused to let her interrupt him. Olivia observed quietly from the corner, noting every small victory. Sarah's mother, who had supported her daughter's arrogance, tried to intervene. Now, let's not be difficult," she said, but even she faltered under Olivia's steady gaze. There was a force in that calm composure that made interference impossible without consequence. Olivia knew the next step required a subtle legal maneuver. She contacted her attorney, drafting letters that clarified ownership, rights, and responsibilities in ways that Sarah's family could not easily dispute. Each letter was carefully worded, precise, and unassailable. When delivered, they carried the weight of authority, subtly undermining Sarah's dominance without a single dramatic confrontation. Days turned into weeks. Sarah tried increasingly desperate measures. She criticized the smallest details, attempted to assert her opinions over important decisions, and even tried to involve extended family members to intimidate Michael. But Olivia's quiet strategy ensured that every attempt backfired. Documents she had prepared caught inconsistencies, Minor oversights became evidence of mismanagement. Even Sarah's casual boasts revealed her miscalculations. One afternoon, Olivia invited Michael to review the property documents together. "We will make small changes, correct oversights, and ensure your rights are protected," she explained. Michael was meticulous, but Olivia guided him, teaching him how to spot subtleties he had previously missed. Every correction strengthened his position, and each minor victory chipped away at Sarah's overconfidence. Meanwhile, Sarah's behavior began to shift. She noticed that her dominance was slipping, though she could not pinpoint why. Her arrogance, once impenetrable, was now being met with quiet resistance and meticulous preparation. She grew frustrated, her tone sharper, her words more clipped. But Olivia never reacted openly. She allowed Sarah's own frustrations to expose her flaws to everyone in the household. The tension culminated one evening when Sarah tried to enforce a decision about the family finances. Olivia, calm and composed, requested a detailed review of the accounts. With Michael's newfound attention to detail, discrepancies were uncovered not major, but significant enough to embarrass Sarah and highlight her mismanagement. Her reaction was telling. She argued, raised her voice, and attempted to intimidate, but Michael, guided by Olivia's wisdom, remained composed. Olivia finally spoke, her voice low but authoritative. "Perhaps it is time we review how decisions are made in this household. Responsibility requires understanding, not arrogance." The room fell silent. Sarah's family, who had previously supported her unquestioningly, looked at each other in unease. Olivia had shifted the balance of power without raising her voice, without public confrontation. The lesson was becoming clear. Respect and competence outweighed arrogance and manipulation. Over the following weeks, Olivia continued her subtle orchestration. She scheduled meetings, clarified legal documents, and ensured that Michael's position both in the household and in the financial matters was secure. Each small action reinforced the authority she wielded quietly, teaching Sarah a lesson she could not ignore. Eventually, Sarah attempted one final show of defiance, believing she could reclaim control through intimidation. But Olivia had anticipated this. When Sarah approached Michael with a harsh demand, Olivia quietly stepped behind him, her presence a silent reminder of the power she held. Michael no longer trembled. He met her glare with calm authority, guided by the lessons his mother had imparted. The effect was immediate. Sarah's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Her carefully constructed facade cracked under the weight of a presence she had underestimated for too long. Michael, confident and composed, now stood as the rightful center of authority in his home, supported by the quiet, unwavering strength of Olivia. It was not vengeance that Olivia sought, but justice, a restoration of dignity and balance. She watched as Sarah's arrogance waned, replaced by a reluctant acknowledgement of the truth. The lesson, delivered through patience, strategy, and quiet authority, was complete. As the sun set over the household, Olivia reflected on the journey. She had taught Michael the power of calm, the importance of preparation, and the strength of standing firm against arrogance. Sarah, for all her cunning and pride, had learned a lesson she would not soon forget. Olivia's revenge was not loud or dramatic. It was precise, measured, and deeply effective. The courtroom incident had been the spark, but the fire of justice was built through patient, deliberate action. And as she watched her son regain confidence and assert his rightful place, Olivia knew the lesson had been learned, one that would last a lifetime. For Olivia, this was victory not in humiliation, but in the restoration of respect, dignity, and justice. The storm had passed, but its echo would linger, a reminder to anyone who underestimated the quiet power of a determined woman. The morning after Olivia's subtle courtroom victory, the household was unusually quiet. Even the clattering footsteps of Sarah and her family seemed restrained, tentative, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the lesson of the previous weeks. Olivia observed from the edge of the kitchen, her hands folded, her calm demeanor betraying none of the satisfaction that simmered beneath the surface. She had planted the seeds carefully, each letter, each clarification of legal rights, each small correction in Michael's accounts, like invisible threads weaving a net that could not be escaped, and now that net had begun to tighten. Sarah, oblivious to the strategy unfolding, tried to reassert her dominance. She rearranged furniture, moved documents, and spoke with clipped authority. Yet each time she attempted to take control, Olivia had already anticipated her move. A simple question, a quiet correction. A subtle document in Michael's hand, and Sarah's plan crumbled before it could materialize. "Michael," she said sharply one afternoon, "I don't understand why you've changed the way we handle these matters. You're making things unnecessarily complicated." Michael looked at her, calm, steady, no trace of the hesitation that had once plagued him. "I'm ensuring that everything is in order, Sarah. If we make mistakes now, the consequences could be far greater later." Sarah's frustration was palpable. She had expected him to remain submissive, to bend under pressure as he had in the past, but Olivia's presence had changed that. Michael now stood with confidence, the knowledge that his mother had his back, empowering him in ways he had never imagined. From her corner, Olivia nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. Patience, she reminded herself. Let them make mistakes, let arrogance guide their actions. The lesson would be revealed at the right moment, and it would be unforgettable. The first sign of real panic came subtly. Sarah's younger brother, Liam, attempted to intervene in household decisions, believing he could manipulate his sister's position. But when Olivia calmly asked him for documentation of his claims, his confidence faltered. A simple request, a subtle display of authority, and his smugness turned to unease. Even Mrs. Porter, Sarah's mother, who had once believed herself untouchable, began to hesitate. She spoke more cautiously, aware that Olivia's quiet vigilance had exposed every minor flaw and misstep. The house that had once been dominated by Sarah's arrogance now felt like a stage under careful scrutiny, and Sarah was no longer the lead actor. Olivia turned her attention to Michael, who was reviewing the household accounts at the dining table. "Michael," she said softly, "we need to ensure that everything is aligned legally. Your rights must be clear and theirs must be defined. Clarity will prevent further manipulation." He looked up at her, admiration and trust in his eyes. "I couldn't do this without you, Mom." "You could," Olivia replied gently, "but wisdom comes from seeing the bigger picture. Let them believe they have control while we prepare the path to reclaim it fully." The days passed, each one a careful balance of observation and subtle intervention. Olivia monitored the family's interactions, noting their behaviors, predicting their mistakes. Sarah's family, once confident in their manipulation, began to stumble. Missed appointments, overlooked documents, and small errors became evidence of their overconfidence. Each time, Olivia ensured Michael was ready to act, armed not with anger, but with precision and clarity. One evening, Sarah attempted a particularly bold move. She planned to change the locks on certain sections of the house, effectively asserting her dominance in a manner that would have humiliated Michael completely. Olivia, aware of the plan, calmly walked in as the locksmith arrived. "Good evening," she said, her tone light but carrying undeniable authority. "May I see the paperwork for this request?" The locksmith handed her the forms, and Olivia's eyes scanned them swiftly. Errors, missing signatures, and inconsistencies leapt out at her immediately. She handed them back, her expression neutral. "I'm afraid these are not valid. Perhaps you should review them before proceeding." Sarah's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," I called the locksmith. Olivia's gaze met hers, steady, unwavering. "Yes, you did, but legality cannot be bypassed with force or intimidation. It's simple procedure, Sarah, you know it." The room fell silent. Sarah's confidence had faltered, replaced by confusion and simmering panic. Olivia's quiet authority had undone her public display of control without confrontation, leaving her unsure of how to proceed. The next morning, Olivia implemented the second phase of her strategy. She had prepared legal documents that clarified the rightful ownership and rights over various aspects of the household, all meticulously worded and ready for delivery. These were not threats, but facts undeniable and precise. When the documents arrived, Sarah's expression shifted from irritation to alarm. Each clause highlighted her overreach, exposed her miscalculations, and reinforced Michael's rightful authority. She read them repeatedly, trying to find a loophole, but none existed. Olivia had anticipated every angle. Michael, now fully aware of the careful orchestration, handled the documents with confidence. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, a rare smile crossing his face. "I see now why patience and strategy matter more than confrontation." Olivia smiled faintly. "It is not about defeating them with anger. It is about ensuring that truth and justice prevail. They will learn their lesson quietly, irrevocably." Sarah's panic grew as minor mishaps continued. The family, who had once rallied around her, now questioned her decisions. A missed payment here, an overlooked contract there, each error magnified, showing that their arrogance could not withstand careful preparation and foresight. Olivia continued her silent guidance, teaching Michael to assert himself gradually, strengthening his confidence and presence in the household. No confrontation, no shouting, only subtle displays of authority and strategic action. The family began to realize that their attempts to dominate were being quietly dismantled at every turn. Then came the final, decisive move. Olivia arranged a family meeting, not confrontational, but formal. She presented the legal clarifications, addressed missteps, and allowed the family to see the reality of their position. Sarah's arrogance crumbled as every claim she had made was carefully, methodically disproved. Her family watched in disbelief, unable to defend her as the truth became undeniable. Michael, standing confidently beside his mother, now embodied authority. He spoke calmly, guided by Olivia's wisdom, addressing concerns and questions with clarity and precision. Sarah's attempts to assert herself were met with polite but firm rebuttals, leaving her frustrated and powerless. Olivia's satisfaction was quiet, internal. The lesson had been delivered. Arrogance and disrespect could not survive in the presence of patience, intelligence, and unwavering authority. Sarah's family, who had once mocked and dominated, now realized that the quiet strength of a determined woman could reshape the balance of power completely. By the end of Part 3, the household had shifted. Michael regained his dignity and authority. Sarah's family learned the consequences of their arrogance. And Olivia remained the unseen force that had orchestrated the restoration of justice and respect. The stage was now set for the final act, the moment where Olivia would ensure that Sarah and her family would never forget the lesson, and that Michael's restored confidence and rightful position would be unshakable. The storm was coming, and this time it would be undeniable. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, but its warmth did little to ease the tension in the house. Sarah had barely slept, haunted by the legal letters and Olivia's quiet authority that seemed to linger in every corner. Her family whispered anxiously among themselves, unsure how to respond, their confidence eroded by weeks of subtle but relentless strategy. Olivia, meanwhile, moved with her usual calm precision. She entered the kitchen where Michael was reviewing the documents from the previous day. His posture was straighter now, his eyes sharper, and the confidence that had been chipped away for months now radiated quietly. He no longer hesitated in Sarah's presence. He had learned the lesson his mother wanted him to understand. Patience, observation, and strategy outweighed aggression. "Mom," he said softly, "today we end this." Olivia nodded. "We only end it with clarity and dignity, not anger. But we will ensure that the lesson is undeniable." By mid-morning, she had gathered Sarah, her husband, and the extended family in the living room. The air was thick with anticipation, but Olivia's calm presence created an unspoken weight. Sarah tried to maintain her composure, but the flicker of doubt in her eyes betrayed her. She had underestimated Olivia, and the realization gnawed at her like an unrelenting shadow. Olivia began speaking, her voice gentle yet firm, commanding attention without raising in volume. "Over the past weeks, I have observed your actions, your words, and your intentions. You have attempted to dominate a household that is not entirely yours, to undermine someone who should never have been questioned. And yet, your arrogance blinded you to the truth. Respect cannot be forced, and control cannot be taken without understanding." Sarah opened her mouth to interrupt, but Michael's hand on her arm stopped her. She froze, caught between instinctive defiance and the undeniable presence of authority that Olivia radiated. Olivia continued, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. "The letters, the clarifications, the corrections you have received are not threats. They are reminders of what true responsibility looks like. Every attempt to manipulate, every act of disrespect, has been carefully documented. And now it is time for you to understand the consequences of your choices. The room fell silent. Even her husband and family members avoided her gaze. The arrogance that had carried them for so long evaporated in the presence of Olivia's calm power. She handed Michael the final set of documents, the culmination of her preparation. Each one clearly demonstrated Sarah's overreach, the error she had made, and the rightful authority that Michael now held. He reviewed them quickly and then placed them firmly on the table in front of Sarah. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady, "these are facts. Your actions have consequences. The arrogance and control you exercised over me and this household cannot continue." Sarah's face turned pale. She looked at Olivia, searching for some sign of mercy or leniency, but found only calm determination. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by the dawning realization that she had been outmaneuvered at every turn. You can't do this," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. This is unfair." Olivia's expression softened just enough to allow the lesson to resonate without cruelty. "Fairness is not about comfort, Sarah. It is about understanding the boundaries of respect, responsibility, and dignity. You have crossed those boundaries repeatedly. Today, the truth simply catches up to you." The extended family shifted uneasily. They had assumed that Sarah's confidence would shield them all, but the weight of undeniable authority now rested squarely with Olivia and Michael. No one spoke, no one moved, and the silence pressed heavily on the room. Michael continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "You will respect the household, its rules, and the people who live here. That includes me, your husband, and my mother. Any further attempts to dominate or manipulate will not be tolerated." Sarah's husband opened his mouth to defend her, but Olivia's gaze met his. In that look, he understood that no words could undo what had been orchestrated with patience, intelligence, and precision. He slumped back, silent. Olivia stepped closer to Sarah. Her voice remained soft, but every word carried the weight of certainty. "Consider this your final warning, not from anger, but from wisdom. You will adjust your behavior, acknowledge your missteps, and act with humility, or you will face the consequences that your arrogance has earned." Sarah's shoulders slumped, the defiance gone, replaced by a reluctant acceptance. She had no choice but to acknowledge the authority that she had so casually mocked before. The lesson, carefully planned and patiently executed, was complete. Over the following days, the transformation was visible. Sarah began to treat Michael with respect, her previous dominance replaced by cautious cooperation. The extended family, observing the shift, adjusted their behavior as well. The household, once dominated by arrogance and manipulation, began to regain balance and harmony. Michael's confidence soared. No longer timid or hesitant, he asserted his position in the home and in business matters, guided by Olivia's wisdom and supported by her unwavering presence. The lessons she had taught quietly, through observation and strategic intervention, had reshaped the dynamics completely. Olivia, ever watchful, ensured that the change was permanent. She continued to oversee the household with subtle authority, never needing to raise her voice, never needing to resort to force. Her victory lay not in humiliation or revenge, but in the restoration of dignity, respect, and order. The final moment came when Sarah, standing in the living room one evening, looked around at the household she had tried to dominate. The evidence of her miscalculations, the documents, the corrected accounts, Michael's restored authority all pointed to a simple truth. She had underestimated the quiet power of a determined woman. Olivia, observing from a distance, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The lesson had been delivered, the balance restored, and the consequences undeniable. Sarah and her family would not forget the authority, wisdom, and patience that had quietly orchestrated this outcome. Michael approached his mother later that night, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you. You've changed everything." Olivia shook her head gently. "You don't need to thank me. You needed to learn that strength is often quiet, and patience is more powerful than confrontation. That lesson, once understood, lasts a lifetime." As she watched her son settle into his rightful place, the household finally calm and balanced, Olivia felt the deep satisfaction that comes not from vengeance, but from justice achieved with precision and wisdom. Sarah's arrogance had been dismantled without public spectacle. Michael's confidence had been restored without confrontation. And Olivia, the quiet, determined force behind it all, had ensured that the moral of the story, respect, patience, and intelligence, would be remembered forever. The storm had passed, but its echo would linger, and in that lingering echo, everyone who had underestimated Olivia's strength would carry the lesson she had so quietly, so brilliantly delivered. Her work was complete. Justice, dignity, and respect had been restored.